Somalia, country in the Horn of Africa. Horn of Africa being East Africa. There is some destabilizing that has taken place. So I first want to go to the U.S. State Department and get their remarks on what's going on in Somalia. And I feel like this is on purpose to keep Somalia destabilized, because Somalia does have natural resources. So this is how the U.S. State Department says U.S. to resume small, persistent presence in Somalia. It says for 16 months now, American military personnel and the U.S. Africa Command area of responsibility have provided advise and assist support to forces in Somalia and on ad hoc basis, traveling to the country when needed and then leaving afterward. U.S. forces are helping Somali forces in the fight against al-Shabaab, but the ad hoc model will soon change to one persistent presence in the country, Pentagon Press Secretary John F. Kirby said. So we're going to be taking a look at what John Kirby says, and we'll move on from there.
Well, I know you guys would be counting. Okay, so a couple things at the top. Let me get organized here. All right. So I can announce today that the president has authorized the Department of Defense to return a small, persistent U.S. military presence to Somalia. This decision was based on a request from Secretary Austin and included advice from senior commanders and, of course, concern for the safety of our troops who have incurred additional risk by deploying in and out of Somalia on an episodic basis for the past 16 months. We're evaluating the appropriate timing and the next steps for implementation of this order. So we're just going to have to give us a little time, and we're working our way through exactly what this is all going to look like. I don't have any additional details for you right now. I want to remind that those forces, as they have been, will continue to be used in training, advising, and equipping partner forces to give them the tools that they need to disrupt, degrade, and monitor al-Shabaab. Our forces are not now, nor will they be, directly engaged in combat operations. The purpose here is to enable a more effective fight against al-Shabaab by local forces, and al-Shabaab has increased in their strength and poses a heightened threat. So again, this is a repositioning of forces that are already in theater, who have traveled in and out of Somalia now on an episodic basis since January of 2021. Our view was, the Secretary's view was that that episodic engagement model was inefficient and increasingly unsustainable. Forces also lost time on target and critical situational awareness needed to detect and disrupt an enemy attack. By time on target, I mean time on station. I'm not suggesting that there was something about direct combat relations or combat operations there. Shifting to a persistent presence will not change the mission, and it will not imply substantial changes in resources. We're working now to evaluate local conditions, including those following the Somali presidential election yesterday, and we're engaging partners in the region, including the Somali government, to determine the best way forward. That is as far as we're going to be able to go on that one today. Also, on Tuesday, after a 2-year hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Association of the U.S. Army and the U.S. Army Pacific Command will convene their 3-day Land Pact Symposium and Exposition in downtown Waikiki. Land Pact is the premier land forces symposium and exposition in the Indo-Pacific region, bringing together government, academia, industry, and many of our allies and partners. Over 25 countries are expected to participate in person this year.
Let me ask you this. The training and assistance to the Somali military, what does this sound like to you? If your answer is Iraq, yeah, sounds like Iraq. And training and assistance Does it sound like Afghanistan? Sounds like that. Sounds like a lot of different wars where, oh, we're just there to train and to lend support. I have trouble believing that, you know? And so when it comes to the United States military, the State Department, the defense, more like offense, they're not going nowhere. And they want to keep a presence there because you only guard something that you see as valuable. And it's not necessarily the lives that are there. It's more the resources that are there. Well, okay, they want the refugees as workers, but other than that, that's about it. Right? Just saying. Let's continue on.
Year. It will run from the 17th to the 19th, and many of the panels and press conferences will be live streamed on Divots. And I'm told that you guys should already have in your email inboxes the feature link page for Divots, so you can access that. Okay, go to questions. Ben from AP.
I know you said you didn't want to have the details, any further details on Somalia, but can you tell us what components will be made up of that and what branches?
Yeah, it's not that I didn't want to have the details. I'm not going to be able to provide additional details in terms of what that's going to look like. I'd refer you to AFRICOM to speak to that, but I doubt seriously that they're going to get into actual unit designations, Ben. Okay. Yep, Jen.
John, can you discuss what the security guarantees you plan to give to Sweden and Finland while they apply to NATO, given that it could be an 8 month to a year-long process? What are the bilateral sort of security guarantees you're willing to?
So I think that's farther afield of where we are right now, Jen. They haven't even made a formal application to NATO. So there's a multi-step process here going from application to accession. And I don't want to get ahead of where we are.
Oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, Sweden's trying to join NATO. So much for that neutrality, right? So, yeah, one of the things that I think that it is imperative for us to remember is what's going on in other countries. Always take it with, they lied about Vietnam. They lied about Kuwait. They lied about Iraq. They lied about Afghanistan. They lied. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. But fool me once, shame. I'm sounding like George W. Bush. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And if they're lying about all these other things, they're lying continuously, or sometimes they'll give little nuggets of truth, but then they'll give you BS, right? And so whenever they say, oh, this person's a dictator, or this person's evil, or, you know, this person is horrible, it's best to take it with a grain of salt and do your own research. Because, like, for instance, Biden called President Xi Jinping a dictator. And they're revving up to do military action. Well, they want to do military action against China. Remind me who has the second biggest military in the world? Who else is a nuclear superpower? It seems like the United States government is a glutton for punishment. I mean, they really, really want a nuclear winter, don't they? That's what it feels like. Let me go to this article, because there's somebody that actually has a much better scope on what's going on in Somalia than what the State Department can give us. So this is out of Black Agenda Report. This is Somalia, the Lawless Frontier. This is by Ann Garrison. And Ann Garrison is giving an interview to Dr. I don't want to butcher his name. Abdul Wahab. So with Dr. Abdul Wahab, so she is talking to him. She starts off her article saying, last week the UN Security Council adopted a resolution to extend the UN peacekeeping mission in Somalia until the end of December 2023, but the troops are supposed to withdraw entirely by the end of December 2024. The mission's name is the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia, or ATMIS. But although the troops are African, it is actually a Security Council mission funded by the United States, European Union, and NATO nations. I spoke to Somali Kenyan scholar, Dr. Abdul Wahab Sheikh Abdismad about the troops, about whether or not they'll really withdraw. I gotta practice these names. Whew. I'm terrible. So Ann Garrison says, Dr. Adwahab, do you think that ATMIS troops will actually withdraw? The doctor says, I don't think so. ATMIS is there for the interest of the West in Somalia, and they'll stay until their job is done. They have been there for 15 years now, just guarding specific government installations, not fighting al-Shabaab. Their mandate was to root al-Shabaab out of Somalia, which is supposed to be a terrorist group. But al-Shabaab has not gone anywhere. In fact, they're much stronger than they were 15 years ago. They infiltrated both ATMIS and Somali National Army. They are bribing the top military brass, looting sophisticated military hardware, and killing both government soldiers and ATMIS troops. This is massive, basically meaning that the United States didn't actually mean to uproot the terrorist threat. The terrorist threats in these regions are tools of the United States, allegedly, to keep military operations there so that the military-industrial complex continues to make money. That's what it's about. Look. Let me enlarge it. Look what he said. He said their mandate was to root al-Shabaab out of Somalia. The al-Shabaab has not gone anywhere. They are much stronger than they were 15 years ago. They infiltrated ATMIS and the Somali National Army, bribing top military brass, looting sophisticated military hardware, and killing both government soldiers and ATMIS troops. They are allowing this to happen. This is like somebody stealing from the store, and you're with that person stealing from the store, but you got to act like you're there to help stop them. Like, oh, no, please stop. Don't do that. And then, or you'll act like you're trying to stop them by, having a tussle, but really the plan is to let that person go, let that person punch you in the face, and then you fall, and then they run out. You're like, stop, please, no. And then they run out with all the money and all the jewels. But in reality, you were working with them the entire time, because guess what? By the time you leave the store and you tell the police, well, yeah, I didn't really get a good description of them. I was just so flustered. And then you run out, and then you go around the corner, you jump in the car, and then you dap up, and you guys, split the money. This stuff ain't new. This stuff ain't new, man. The United States is just doing the same thing. And they'll just allow groups like al-Shabaab to continue, because then that means that they get to keep a presence, because that means there's more guns to manufacture, more uniforms to manufacture, more missiles, more bombs, more Humvees, more tanks. And that's how it goes. It's never to actually truly uproot a terrorist organization out. ISIS still exists. We haven't heard from them in a while. Al-Qaeda still exists. Why? Because the idea was to never root them out. It was always to keep them in place as a scapegoat, to keep the military presence in place. The United States is fully invested in forever war because the corporations demand it. That's why. Let's continue in the article. I'm not going to read the entire article because I really want you guys to read it for yourself. Ann Garrison gives a really great interview here. Shout out to Ann Garrison, by the way. Ann Garrison also asks, what interests of the Western world do they serve, and how do they do that? The doctor says, when I say the Western world, I mean the United States, United Kingdom, European Union, and NATO. That's who funds ATMOS. The African Union failed to raise funds for it. The West's interest is to keep Somalia weak, fragmented, and fragile, so that they can easily exploit its resources. And Garrison asks, can you remind us what the resources are? The doctor says, Somalia enjoys the longest coastline in Africa. The European Union and others are doing illegal fishing and mining and dumping their worst waste products off the Somali coast. They're also eager to extract its untapped offshore oil and gas reserves. I want to go to another point. So Ian Garrison asks, what do U.S. troops bombing al-Shabaab add to all this chaos and lawlessness? The doctor says, they are there for their own interests, securing resources and geopolitical positioning for the West. They don't care about anything else. So basically, it's what we all thought the entire time. They're not actually there to protect the Somali people. They're not actually there. They're not actually there to make sure that al-Shabaab is defeated. The goal is not to defeat. The goal is to fight itself. This is why it is, like the gentleman earlier said, episodic. It's war for the United States is a soap opera. It's a soap opera. What happens in soap operas, right? You watch, there's conflict, might be a little bit of resolution, but not totally. And then the conflict continues next episode, 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 next episode. And it does not stop. Is there an end, a true end to soap operas? And if you guys have ever watched All My Children, General Hospital, As the World Turns, Young and the Restless, you guys know there's never an end. And so because of that, you see that the United States continues this because it's money, good money, comes in, consistent. War, 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 war. Oh, then we'll go down just a little bit in our presence to make you think that they're winding things down. And then they're going, oh my God, look at this terrorist group. They've ramped up, so we have to ramp up because perish the thought if any other people die, which they really don't care about at the end, anybody else die. Let me go to I have this other video I wanted to just get some points out of. If things can work properly. There we go. Let's see. Ooh. God, I love my people. All right, so let me see. There's a lot going on right now. Okay. So let me share this with you guys. Atmos drawdown.
Somalia, the country with the largest national coastline of 3,000 kilometers in Africa, is nothing short of beauty. But the perennial insurgency and terrorist attacks by the al-Shabaab mar the beautiful name it has created for itself. With over 3 decades of combat and unrest, the pillars of democracy have tumbled. Rule of law and governance a thing of the past. Regardless, the country remains committed in its journey to recovery. It has hosted tens of thousands of troops in its volatile central and southern regions for the last 16 years. For 15 years, the Africa Union Mission in Somalia, AMISOM, camped at Somalia beginning January 2007 before paving way for the Africa Union Transition Mission in Somalia, ATMIS, in January 2022. Less combative but still saliently powerful as its predecessor, ATMIS aims at helping the war-stricken nation to not only be free from acts of terror, but also have enough mechanisms to govern itself.
We are working alongside with them. Even the Somali police are with us. We are always working around the clock.
There has been humanitarian aid too, for the war has come with its own consequences, including lack of food, water, and inadequate medical services. The soldiers try as much as possible to live their normal lives along their military duties.
Here you can see there are quite a number of officers, staff officers from different countries. 14 countries are represented here.
Through these efforts, the Somali National Army is growing even stronger. But all is not as good as it seems. The al-Shabaab still poses a threat to the sovereignty of the country. In May 26th, al-Shabaab mounted a deadly attack on a military base housing some 200 Ugandan soldiers. ATMIS confirmed that at around 5 a.m., the Peacekeepers Forward operating base in Bulu Malera, approximately 120 kilometers southwest of Mogadishu, was attacked by the al-Shabaab.
If the United States really wanted to defeat al-Shabaab, if they really wanted to get rid of them out of the region, it would have been done. It would have been done a long time ago. But like I said, that's never the goal. And anybody who is part of the Somali National Army, either they know that the United States doesn't intend to, or they believe the lie, thinking that, oh, well, the United States and the UN and the EU, and they're all trying to help. When in reality, it's no, you're just cannon fodder to keep the engine going of the military-industrial complex. And this is why it's so important to look at what they're doing in Africa, because they keep this going and they keep the people suffering. Remember what Michael Parenti said about there's no such thing as a poor country. They're just overly exploited. Think about the riches that many countries like the DRC, like Kenya, like Somalia, like Uganda. Think about these countries like Libya. Think about all these countries in Africa that have all these resources, which they could bring themselves up, which they could do for themselves. But because of the West and their greed by means of corporations, they do not help in truly liberating the people. And in fact, a lot of the issues were brought on by the West via colonialization. And so now, who's left to clean up the mess? Well, Africans aren't there to clean up the mess that the West started. But as the Africans are cleaning up the mess, the West keeps throwing. It's just like, okay, you have a room, you have a bunch of trash, right? And you're trying to sweep it up, and you have the dustpan, and you're sweeping it up, and then as you're trying to put, the dirt into the trash bag, well, then the West will come in and, behind your back, throw some more dirt on the ground. And then you'll keep sweeping, and then they'll throw some more dirt behind your back, more dirt. And it feels like no matter what you do, you just can't clean it up, right? Even though you weren't the one that dirtied it up in the first place. It was the West. It was colonialization that dirtied it up in the first place. But because the West says, oh, I'm here to help. They're not here to help. They're here to keep it dirty because they want to see you keep sweeping. This is what they do to countries like Africa. You don't think they're not doing it to South America? Hell yeah, they're doing it to South America. So that's the thing. Because it's within their financial and geopolitical interests to keep it happening in the global South. So that's why these stories are so important, because we're realizing how they manipulate African countries to keep their resources in the hands of the West. This is what they do. And the United States will manipulate us constantly over and over and say, we're just there to help. We're just there for security. We're just there for training. When in reality, it's there for money for the corporations.
The militants used a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device and suicide bombers. The attack left over 50 soldiers dead. Bulo Malero was once recaptured by the AMISOM in 2014 that gave way to the establishment of a military base there to maintain order. The commander at that time, Major General Dick Olum, confirmed they had recaptured Bulo Malero and they will stay there to ensure peace.
It was a well-planned operation under the battle group commander, battle group number 12, battle group 12, with 37 Battalion, 43 Battalion, and 61 Battalion. This location of Bulo Malero was actually the responsibility of 37 Battalion, and they moved in smartly, cautiously, and we took over the city at exactly 1:30 hours.
Residents even went back to their homes. Community engagement proved helpful in that mission. Without enhancing the community, the al-Shabaab will win the minds of the locals, telling them that the AU is meddling in their self-determination and wants to control them, and this will not be a tough task since the al-Shabaab has enough resources to hire more fighters.
But they don't believe in self-determination. That's the crazy part. If they actually believed in self-determination, then to be honest with you, they leave the country alone. They would. Okay, you want to give Somalia money and funds? Okay, just give it to them and leave them alone. And whatever sanctions that you may have, lift those sanctions if you have any. So leave them alone. Let them fight their own battle. If they really have self-determination, let them determine themselves. Get your hand out of the country. But the United States doesn't want to do that. That's like saying, okay, I'm going to let you drive the car, but you keep your hand on the wheel. Why do you have your hand on the wheel? Let me drive the car. If I am the driver, let me drive the car. Why you got the hand on the wheel? This is what the United States does. Oh, yeah, we're going to let you drive. Go ahead and put, look. This is, the United States treats these countries like they're a little kid sitting on your lap and you have your hands on the wheel and you're driving. Oh, I'm driving. And then you're the adult and you're like, yes, sweetie heart, you're driving. When in reality, they're not. Who's driving this? The West is driving this. The people in Mogadishu and the rest of Somalia, they do not have self-determination. It's never the goal. And so then people wise up who know what people like me know, and this is why they can be radicalized to join al-Shabaab. So this is what happens. Because they want it to happen. That's why. They want them to be radicalized. So that means more people will keep joining al-Shabaab, and then they go, oh, well, we have these people we have to fight because they're so radicalized in the nation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a vicious cycle. That's what they do. This is why, they constantly want this to happen. It's a feedback loop. So that's what's going on in Somalia right now. And there are so many people who are suffering there, all because of the greed of the United States. The greed of the corporations, the corporate powers. I would love to have Ann Garrison on to talk more at length about this. Hopefully, I'm trying to get in contact with her, but I think it's deeply important. This is why when we talk about anti-war, we have to talk about these conflicts that are not as widely known in other countries. Everybody's talking about the proxy war in Ukraine, right? Everybody. Which is important. It is very important. But are we also talking about what's going on in Democratic Republic of Congo? Are we talking about what's going on in Somalia? Are we talking about what's going on in Uganda? Are we going to be talking about in Sudan? are we going to be talking about what's going on in these countries? Because the United States is also doing military operations in these countries too, or they're providing assistance in these military operations in these countries. When in reality is keeping destabilization within these countries, because if you keep it destabilized, that means you get to keep a presence there. And if you keep a presence there, the military industrial complex, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and all those other merchants of death get to stay there and make more money. And then their shareholders make more money. So this is why the West keeps African nations, southeastern and southwestern nations, destabilized, because it is to their benefit. That's why the IMF and the World Bank and all them, they want to keep it that way. But at whose expense? The people. This is why it is important for us to change the system so that people in the global south no longer suffer.